The first Dark Souls is fondly remembered for many things: its interconnected world, variety of equipment, unique memorable NPCs and their quest lines, and last but not least, its boss fights, for better or for worse. These generally big dudes and dudettes are going to be the primary topic of today's video. There are 26 bosses in the game overall, including the 4 located within Ulasil as part of the Artorias of the Abyss DLC. Naturally, not all 26 bosses need to be slain in order to reach the game's ending. That being said, while traversing through Lordaeron casually, players generally dread the thought of missing out on some amazing optional fights that the developers might have hidden away from them. Not killing all 26 bosses within one's first playthrough can be a fantastic incentive to repeat the extraordinary journey through Dark Souls. But what if one's goal isn't killing all of the bosses scattered around the world, but the exact opposite? For whatever reason, maybe one just likes them so much they can't bear accepting life without them. Or maybe it's because there exists an actual speedrunning category called least bosses. No matter what the case is, let's explore the question of how many bosses really need to be bested in order to reach Gwyn and complete the first installment of the Dark Souls series. We will begin by evaluating the lowest number casually, then see how low we can go utilizing special strategies, and finally, look at the remaining bosses and discuss why they might or might not be skipped. Please enjoy. First, we need to establish what a casual player needs to achieve before finally being allowed to clash with the game's final boss. Gwyn is located in the Kiln of the First Flame, locked behind a massive gate situated in Firelink Altar. In order to open this gate, 2 Lord Souls and 2 Lord Soul Shards need to be offered to the Lord Vessel, which must be placed on the altar. These items are dropped by the so-called 4 Lords: Seath the Scaleless in the depths of crystal caves hidden behind the Duke's archives, Nito, set in his domain behind the Tomb of the Giants, 4 Kings residing within the abyss below New Londo ruins, and finally, Bed of Chaos, surviving at the heart of Lost Isolate. These are the 4 main bosses which any player hoping to finish the game must beat. All other necessary fights and progression are done in order to achieve that goal. Seath probably isn't too pleasant of a companion and does not have anyone else standing in one's way before encountering him. Well, except for himself on the first confrontation, but that doesn't count. The same cannot be said about Nito, and at the entrance to the Tomb of the Giants, Pinwheel is awaiting the player's arrival. 4 Kings also have one prerequisite before the player can take them on: wearing the Covenant of Artorias ring, which allows the chosen undead to survive within the abyss. Unfortunately, Artorias' ring was eaten by his buddy Great Grey Wolf Sif, who's grieving by his master's grave in Darkroot Garden. Killing him is thus necessary to obtain this job, to the disappointment of many, although I do not understand this sadness. They must have never watched the Dark Souls speedrun be ruined by this bad boy. With the last Lord, Bed of Chaos, things are a little bit more complicated and some family matters need to be settled first. One of her daughters, the Chaos Witch Quelag, must be defeated in order to even reach Lost Isolate. Then, her big son spreading too much lava around Ceaseless Discharge has to go down, so that the player may further progress through the area. Once this feat is done, 2 more goons stand in the way: Demon Pharisage and also Centipede Demon. However, both these bosses can be skipped in a casual playthrough if one discovers a room with Quelag's sister, the Fair Lady, concealed behind an illusory wall. The chosen undead can join her covenant, and upon offering 30 humanities, open up a shortcut, allowing for a direct passage from ahead of the Demon Pharisage arena, leading all the way to Bed of Chaos. This puts us at 9 required bosses so far, but we cannot end it there. I mentioned the Lord Vessel, a key item which needs to be obtained and placed upon the Firelink altar and satiated for the gate to Kiln to open. Placing it there also dissipates golden fog gates blocking entrances to all of the lords. Obtaining the vessel is no easy task in itself. It is placed in the Analondo Cathedral behind the notorious Ornstein and Smoke boss fight. Before the chosen undead may be transported to the City of Gods, however, they must defeat the Iron Golem atop of Sen's fortress to prove themselves worthy. The fortress itself doesn't contain any other bosses, but its gate is initially locked. 2 bells of awakening need to be rung for it to open. The upper bell is guarded by bell gargoyles in some more 2-on-1 action. and the lower bell rests right after Quelaag's domain, who we have already counted. Finally, at the very beginning, Asylum Demon needs a can of Whoopass in order for the Chosen Undead to leave the starting area of Northern Undead Asylum. All in all, 13 is the minimal number of mandatory bosses if one hopes to finish Dark Souls casually, so only 50% of the overall number. That's a very solid amount of optional content if you ask me, but chances are most people fought way more than just the aforementioned 13. Bosses like Taurus Demon, Capra Demon, or Gaping Dragon can be omitted from one's playthrough by either using the Master Key as a starting gift or cleverly navigating the map. They are therefore not required, but I bet the general player base had a dance with them during their playthroughs. So far, it seems like it might be difficult to radically reduce the counted number, but rest assured, many things are possible within the realm of speedrunning. Let us now enter it and dive straight into the any percent category. Any percent means finishing the game as fast as possible with no restrictions on the matter of completion. That means anything goes when it comes to abusing the in-game mechanics to our advantage. The biggest exploit of all within this category is the homeward wrong warp glitch. I have covered wrong warping in detail in one of my previous videos, which is linked in the description and also up there, so I won't explain it thoroughly. Long story short, wrong warping allows the player to manipulate an intended destination of a warp and change it for another. Luckily for us, one of the available destinations is located behind the gate leading to the kiln. However, in order to manipulate the warp in this manner, one must first rest at the Firelink Altar bonfire, which is only accessible after receiving the Lord Vessel. Nevertheless, remember what I said. Opening the kiln gate requires the 4 lords to be killed, and with it, also several other bosses. Being able to bypass the gate while it's closed thus cuts out substantial amounts of the game's content and reduces the boss count to, let's see, Asylum Demon at the start, Gargoyles and Quelaag to ring the bells, and as such open Sen's Fortress, but more importantly also open the Firelink Altar Pit in Firelink Shrine, Iron Golem to reach Anolondo, and Ornstein and Smo to obtain the Lord Vessel. After wrong warping, one lord must nonetheless be killed, Gwyn himself. The massive wrong warp allows for the game to be finished with mere 6 boss fights completed, less than a fourth of the overall amount. That is an incredible achievement using just one glitch and might seem hard to top. After all, the any percent category is the fastest completed speedrun, so is this the end of the road when it comes to reducing the number of necessary bosses? In many games, there are copious amounts of glitches, exploits and tricks which are known but do not find a common use in traditional speedruns. Their existence is still important, as familiarity with them can contribute greatly to the overall knowledge of the game and sometimes lead to even greater discoveries, potentially more relevant for speedrunning. Even if they are not faster, they might be fun to perform and constitute the basis for fun challenges and non-traditional speedrunning categories. Dark Souls is no exception, and the number of quirks hiding within the game's code is remarkable. I mean, just look at the Chosen Undead having a comfy barbecue. Feasting aside, let us investigate what more could be done to reduce the boss counter even further from the 6 within any percent, even though it might come with the necessary time loss. The first unlikely step is trying to bypass the very first boss fight the Chosen Undead encounters, the Asylum Demon. Killing Asylum Demon is rather quick, whether by utilizing black firebombs or fighting him regularly on the second go. Skipping the demon thus isn't a great incentive when speed is the goal, and soon you will see why. When the goal is killing the fewest bosses possible, however, things take a turn. Leaving the Undead Asylum requires unlocking this massive door within Asylum Demon's arena using the Big Pilgrim's Key. This key can be obtained in one of 2 ways. By default, Asylum Demon is in possession of the key, and when slain during the second encounter, drops it for the Chosen Undead. However, if Asylum Demon is killed during the first encounter, he will drop the Demon's Great Hammer instead, and it will be Oscar handing out the key, or dropping it, whatever you decide. Skipping past the giant doors without the Big Pilgrim's Key unfortunately isn't possible. What is possible is obtaining the key without Asylum Demon being slain. But how? In either of possible alternatives, Asylum Demon has to die, sooner or later. So how can we avoid this scenario? Well, truth be told, Asylum Demon still dies with the skip being performed, but not really. Dark Souls only acknowledges the boss's defeat once the victory achieved screen pops up, instead of when the health bar is depleted. This means there's a certain delay between killing the boss and the game saving the state of the boss fight. For example, when I kill Taurus Demon here and Dark Sign before the victory achieved message, the boss stays alive. This can sometimes come to bait the speedrunners, as they will try to optimize their teleports using the Dark Sign or Homeward Bones as soon as possible to minimize waiting time and leave the fight just as the victory screen pops up, but mistime it and leave the boss alive. With Asylum Demon, however, this delay can be exploited. When Asylum Demon is killed on the first go, the game has to react accordingly and change the flags for item drops, switch out the big Pilgrim's key for the hammer, and give the key to Oscar. With this implementation, checking for the boss's death would be too late, as you already get the drops at that point. Instead, the developers need to monitor the demon's health points. If they reach 0 or lower, the item drops get exchanged. This is a perfect opportunity to exploit the delay between health bar depletion and boss death recognition. By reloading the game using a Dark Sign or save and quitting after lowering Asylum Demon's health bar to 0, but before the victory achieved screen appears, we can activate the item exchange while keeping Asylum Demon alive. This way, the big Pilgrim's key can be looted from Oscar, and during the second encounter with the boss, the doors can simply be opened. Asylum Demon is never considered dead, and the player can progress further into the game, bringing us down to 5 necessary bosses. The next fight we will take a look at is Quelaag. As mentioned before, the only reason she needs to be killed is to reach the lower bell of awakening, which is required for opening the pit to Fouling Altar. Killing Quelaag itself therefore doesn't present a necessary condition if you want to finish the game. Any kind of simple Quelaag skip could have potentially been faster than regularly fighting her, but unfortunately, given the level structure and her domain being the only connecting piece between Blighttown and Lost Izalith, there isn't much wiggle room. In fact, there is just about nothing outside of the game's boundaries as soon as one reaches the tunnel preceding the fight. The only way to skip Quelaag would be to somehow brute force ourselves through the arena, which would mean getting past the fog wall separating it from the room where the bell is situated. With this in mind, we need to think outside of the box and abuse something a little more peculiar, just like in Asylum Demon's case. In December 2016, one of the best known skips in Dark Souls was discovered, the Sen's Gate skip. This skip allows the speedrunners to enter Sen's Fortress without ringing the bells by abusing a mechanic called the Death Cam. Although one does not need to ring the bells to enter Sen's Fortress utilizing this exploit, ringing them is nevertheless necessary to enter Fouling Altar. An alternative way to enter it would be by killing Sif, then 4 kings, and then using Kath to transport you there. However, obtaining the Covenant of Artorias requires for Sif to be dead, just as 4 kings need to be defeated for Kath to spawn, virtually making these 2 boss fights unskippable, at least for now. Anyways, the Death Cam is a special state which is generally used for a cinematic effect when the chosen undead falls to their death. But the top-down view is not the only feature involved. As soon as a Death Cam is active, the game won't load or deload any areas or assets. The chosen undead is expected to die after all. In a lot of cases, the Death Cam trigger is actually separated from a kill box which reduces the player's health bar to 0, and these 2 triggers tend to not fully overlap. As such, in many areas it is actually possible to activate the Death Cam while staying alive. But why would you want to do it and simulate the original Grand Theft Auto in Dark Souls? In order to save computing power, the game loads assets to areas later than the areas themselves. In the case of the Sen's Fortress Death Cam, the start of the fortress is loaded at that point, while the gate is not. It was this 2016 discovery which prompted the community to explore other areas of the game for potential Death Cam skip spots. The speedrunner Kumul was the one to look for possibilities in heavily vertical Blighttown. Per his words, it naturally had to be in some weird place, because one needed to hit the Death Cam while falling, but then ending up someplace safe. Kumul managed to find such a place utilizing some crafty parkour and proceeded to navigate through the swamp, eagerly awaiting what would be loaded and what wouldn't. To his surprise, both the entrance and the bell fog gates were loaded. Quelaag was loaded as well, including her AI, attacking the chosen undead as he tried to navigate around her arena blindly. But how so? The death cam was activated so far away from the fight. There is no way all of that is loaded the entire time, right? This suspicion is correct, as none of these assets are loaded at the time of triggering the death cam. So what's the culprit? You might have guessed it by now. The opening Quelaag cutscene, which plays after entering the fight, is responsible. When entering the arena for the first time, a trigger initiating certain event script calls is activated. The calls work normally even while in the deathcam state, and they play the cutscene, load Quelaag, her AI, and also the further fog gate. However, the whole process happens only on the first go, and on recurring instances, no event scripts are called, which means no cutscene, no Quelaag, and also no fog gate. As such, the Quelaag fight has to be entered first and left afterwards. Then the fight is entered again, but with the death cam activated. Unfortunately, this is the reason why Quelaag's skip turns out to be much slower than fighting her regularly. Once the pesky fog gate is bypassed, the task is not over yet, as the entire room with the bell is considered to be part of Quelaag's arena. Performing a save and quit there would thus put you back in front of the first fog gate. Luckily, a further area is also loaded, and thus navigating outside of the room just by the stairs is possible. Once the save and quit is performed, the bell can be run freely, while Quelaag is still chilling in her domain. You can easily cheese her from here, but that is not what we're after, is it? Down to just 4 bosses. Once the chosen undead slays Iron Golem atop of Sen's fortress, they are deemed worthy of entering Anolondo, the city of gods. A little ring spawns in the middle of the arena, and upon interacting with it, a cutscene in which a group of Batwing demons transport the player to the intended destination plays. They could certainly be a little bit more attentive, but I suppose they get the job done. The issue facing the speedrunners here is quite different than in the cases of Asylum Demon or Quelaag. In both those instances, the desired destination was directly connected to the boss's arena and simply blocked the way, either by a locked door or by a fog gate. With Iron Golem, however, we are at a dead end. The only way to progress is by essentially getting teleported through interacting with an object, which spawns only after Iron Golem's defeat. This unprecedented situation will yet again necessitate an original solution. Anolondo is above Sen's fortress, all the way behind this fortification, or so it is made to seem. Exploring the area within a map viewer reveals that it is not exactly the case, and parts of Anolondo are situated on the same footing as the Iron Golem arena. Could there be a way to exploit this? In video games, there are certain interactions or particular attacks which are programmed in a very rigid way. Quite often, with some creative input, these set-in-stone animations can be exploited to speedrunners' advantage. One example might be the partake skip from Dark Souls 3, where a hard-coded grab animation is abused to clip out of bounds. Iron Golem does have a relatively varied moveset, containing a grab attack within it. Getting grabbed and thrown by the golem is known to have some fascinating results, such as bypassing kill boxes surrounding the arena and surviving the fall down to the bottom of the fortress. There is no way such a throw could get us through the wall separating the arena from Anolondo, or far enough to reach it for that matter. Besides hard-coded animations, there is another potentially exploitable area in video games: animation overlaps. In DS1 particularly, certain animations might be skipped if they are initiated on the same frame as the player suffers a hit from an enemy. In this case, even though entering a fog gate should grant me invincibility frames, I was attacked by a hollow on the very first frame of the animation. Instead of playing out fully, the animation is cancelled, but the fog gate still dissipates. This principle can be applied to enemies attempting a grab attack. If an enemy takes damage on the very first frame of them grabbing the chosen undead, this happens. The nature of the launch depends on the difference between players' position on the frame of the grab and the position where the grab attempts to put them. With such a high velocity, collision is a mere suggestion, as the game's engine fails to check for it on time. With Iron Golem's case, the grab cancel has been utilized to cheese the boss by leaving his arena after the fight had been initiated, as Kumul demonstrates in this 2017 Cheese All Bosses run. However, reaching Anolondo with this exploit is not possible, as the distance covered is quite short. So what do we do about it? Can we not make this strategy work after all? Well, in May 2018, Dark Souls Remastered released, running at smooth 60 frames per second. As you probably know, physics engines in video games tend to be tied to frame rates, and jumping from 30 to 60 FPS is quite the difference. This difference manifests, besides many other instances, during a grab cancel as well. Although I must note the frame rates are not the only shenanigans at play here. With the proper lineup, which is not consistent at all, given the nature of the trick and it being frame perfect, the chosen undead can end up reaching Analondo, which slows in time for them to land on a piece of collision and not just fall into the void. But this area is out of bounds, so how do we get back within the map's boundaries? You know how I talked about the homeward wrong warp earlier? There's another way of activating the wrong warp. Exploiting the ability to force quit the game during a loading screen. Again, I don't want to go into too much detail as my any % force quit world record history video covers this topic thoroughly. In short, force quit wrong warping puts the player to a fail-safe location within an area arbitrarily selected by the developers without having to rest at a bonfire within that specific area, unlike with the homeward wrong warp. For Analondo, the location is its very beginning, making the skip go from Iron Golem precisely to the originally desired destination the chosen undead arrives at. The Iron Golem skip puts the remastered version of Dark Souls down to just 3 bosses, an outstanding achievement by the speedrunning and glitch hunting community. Unfortunately, this particular skip is a terrible one to execute. Relying on enemy AI is always a nuisance, let alone when one needs to line up the boss, line up themselves, and then frame perfectly cancel a specific attack. Given this, and also where the player ends up after performing the skip, it is obvious why simply killing the golem presents the faster option. Let's now pay attention to the 3 remaining boss fights, the Bell Gargoyles, Ornstein and Smough, and Gwyn, none of which at the moment can be skipped. Gargoyles are the ones who could be skipped, at least in theory. Ringing the bell they guard isn't directly tied with the state of the boss fight, and as such, similar opportunity as with Quelag presents itself. However, the issue are available death counts. The one regularly used for the aforementioned Sense Gate skip represents the closest one. The upper floor of the church is loaded at the point of its activation, but unfortunately there are 2 ladders leading up to the Gargoyles arena. As I mentioned earlier, assets to areas are loaded in later than the areas themselves, and with this death cam, the ladders are not present, making the rooftop out of reach. So while in theory skipping Gargoyles to ring the bell might be possible, we currently do not have a way to do so. Moving on, with Ornstein and Smough the situation is reversed. There's a suitable death cam available near the cathedral, even though its properties differ from the ones we have examined earlier. This deathcam doesn't consist of a plane separated from a kill box, and is instead programmed to kill the player upon landing on solid ground. With the use of fall control, this deathcam can however be delayed for as long as the spell is active. While in this deathcam, the ominous fight is loaded, allowing us to enter it just like with Quelag. It is even possible to bypass either of the 2 fog gates separating the elevators from the fight's battleground. Unfortunately, there are 2 problems. First, fall control runs out way before that point is reached, killing the chosen undead. Second, even if fall control's limited duration wasn't an issue, the elevators do not activate until the fight's super phase is finished, making any effort in reaching them a deadlock. While we have seen a skip be possible when progression was tied to boss's death in the case of Iron Golem, and Super Ornstein even enjoys a grab attack in his arsenal, it is not possible to gain any height in order to reach the arena's upper level by abusing it. Due to all the problems presented, it doesn't look like we'll be getting a skip for this iconic duo anytime soon. Skipping Gwyn is the most improbable of all bosses. Both the game's endings are tied to his death, whether one chooses to exit the arena and become the Dark Lord, or link the flame instead. There are games which do not connect credits triggers directly to the final boss's status, such as in Prince of Persia: The Sands of Time, where it is possible to activate the ending by hitting a trigger high up above the level. Dark Souls, however, does not present any such opportunities, so unless a way to manipulate event flags to start one of the endings without killing Gwyn is discovered, there is pretty much no way of bypassing the plim plim plon. Still, being able to finish Dark Souls with mere 3 bosses killed is outstanding. It is less than a fourth of the casually required bosses, and 23 fights remain untouched overall. Miyazaki was completely okay with hiding content from the players, but I do not think this is what he envisioned. Although all 3 remaining bosses seem unlikely to be circumvented, new strategies and glitches are being actively sought out and discovered by the speedrunners, even a decade after the game's release. It is quite possible that in the future, this video might need some updating. If you don't want to miss any new discoveries, consider subscribing to the channel as I will surely cover them. Until then, thank you for watching and have a great day.